wanted to take a break from the goal guides I've been doing recently to talk about something that I've noticed while playing Guild Wars 2. And no, it's not why is Ritlock so ruggedly handsome. What I wanted to talk about was one of the coolest thematically correct profession and why it's the least played out of all 9 of the professions available. Now, granted, I know that one profession is always going to be the least played out of all the other 9. I know, but I'm surprised with this one. And it only beats out the Revenant, which is the 8th least played profession, by a little bit. And it had a whole core expansion head start. So the question I want to ask you is, what's wrong with the engineer? Why is it the least played profession in Guild Wars 2? To answer this, I'm going to look at 3 different aspects when talking specifically about the engineer. We're going to look at class fantasy, role in the current meta, and then we're going to look at the ease of use. How easily can we pick it up and play? And as a point, I'm not harping on engineers. I really enjoy the playstyle of the engineer profession. I've yet to dive into the elite specializations, but they both look awesome. I just wanted to ask a question. Many MMOs have attempted to create this class fantasy, this profession, and some have hit it, some haven't even bothered. For a while, right before Shadowlands was released for World of Warcraft, there was talks that there was going to be a Tinker class, which makes sense canonically because there was Tinkers in Warcraft 3. But much like the expansion itself, those rumors turned out to be a flop. Guild Wars 2 put a unique design to engineers, not only making them mechanical geniuses, but also really skilled in alchemy. I mean, one of the main trait lines is alchemy itself. So it makes sense. Elixirs are built into their kit. Guild Wars 2 Engineer really does hit a lot of the boxes. We have turrets, gadgets, inventions, and more, all built into the class, which is really cool. You're not a necromancer who literally has the power to raise the dead. You're just a scrappy, fix-it-on-the-fly type person, and that fits the aesthetic very well. That's to me what engineers are. Personally, I've loved playing the core engineer. Now, granted, I haven't gotten too deep into the rest of the content utilizing this as a character, although I will say that my main might be changing depending on what End of Dragons has in store for the engineer. But I do have a lot of flexibility, and I also believe that this is why they only have a handful of weapons that they can use. It's because they have kits for days. They have a flamethrower, bomb, grenade, elixir gun. I mean, there's so many different weapon skills that they can use in combat. It actually is the most out of any other profession in the game. So if I wanted to play more of like an explosive power on strike damage character, I could go with grenades and bombs and go that route. Or if I wanted to go more condition damage, I could use dual wielding pistols and focus on bleeds and other damage over time effects. And even to build more into the class fantasy, like, they can use a rifle, but they are not like some skilled assassin or similar to the Deadeye. Nah, they're just shooting from the hip and praying. Now, I personally haven't had the opportunity yet to dive into either the Scrapper or the Hollowsmith, but both of them look incredibly unique themselves. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so drawn to this, is because of its uniqueness. Honestly, in a nutshell, I don't believe class fantasy or lack thereof or a misrepresentation is why this profession isn't played as much. I can't believe that. Now, where do the engineers sit in the current meta? So for us to understand that a little bit better, we should probably define what type of meta we're looking at, because there are multiple routes that you can take once you've reached endgame. So you can do raids, you can do fractals, you can do PvP. Those are usually the 1, 2, 3, the very big ones, we'll say. In raids, engineers can generally earn their spot as either damage or a healing support type character. The most popular method is obviously going to be the Hollowsmith. Hollowsmith has a bit of versatility that they can be either the on-strike power, sudden burst damage, or they can be a condition over time damage dealer. Now, I've heard that the condition damage dealer, it takes a while and there's a lot of steps that have to go into it to maximize your rotation, so I'm going to safely assume that most people focus on just power Hollowsmith. And this also might lead into why the engineer isn't played as much, is that there's a long, complicated complicated path for them to achieve their damage? Does it square up with the rest of professions that have an easier time at it? Who knows? As a side mention, Scrapper, Healer is the common support type for the engineer in raids. Now let's jump over to Fractal. With higher tier Fractals, you have essentially a set 1, 2, 3, and you can fill in the blank with 2 DPS. So your first is a Chronomancer, your second is going to be a support druid, and then third is going to be a warrior, typically a banner slave warrior. Banners are like super overpowered for warriors and everyone else. This leaves roughly 2 spots for DPS to come in. Now, of course, the engineer can easily earn its spot either through that Hollowsmith again, or if they wanted to play the core engineer and use more of a power hit damage. I wouldn't necessarily say that engineers are limited in their capacity to earn a spot for Fractals. Lastly, let's look at PvP. Now, to put this into a nutshell, this covers not only structured PvP, but world versus world. And honestly, here as well, I can't see engineers being limited at all. Like, at all. That's one of the beautiful things about PvP in Guild Wars 2, specifically, I'll say world versus world, is that you can play whatever build you want. Now, of course, builds are going to vary in their degree of effectiveness, but if you want to be a flamethrower engineer for core, sure, go toast some people. Burn them up. Or if you wanted to play more the mortar as your elite skill and utilize that, you could do that too. There is a lot of versatility when it comes to PvP. Before we get into ease of use, how easy it is to play the profession, quick sidebar. To earn your like and subscription, I'm going to tell you one solid dad joke. Why do seagulls fly over the ocean? Because if they flew over the bay, they would be called bagels. Damn it, now I'm hungry. There's quite a few kits to unpack here. You get it because they use kits. It's a dad joke. So looking at all the different skills, all the different weapons, all the different kits, everything that they can use, there's a lot. I mentioned earlier that they have the most active skills, or at least the capability of the most active skills in the game out of every other profession. And it makes sense. We got flamethrowers, we got grenades, we got bombs, we got an elixir gun, we got a mortar kit. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. I mean, this could be seriously daunting for a new player in Guild Wars 2. I mean, they're still trying to figure out what the hell a Vista is, let alone when's the right time for me to jump into my flamethrower or then jump back out and go into grenade. And as mentioned again, I think this is why they don't have nearly as much weapon capabilities as other professions, is because they literally bring a whole bunch of inventions to the table, so they don't necessarily need to have too many new weapons. And this is of course outside of their elite specialization, so with the hammer for the scrapper and then the main hand sword for the hollowsmith. The profession has a lot of unique abilities and a lot of thematically correct things, and I think that might be part of the problem. At least from what I've discovered from either the community or just talking to people, it seems like the engineer has a very complicated rotation for mediocre results. The slightest misstep, the wrong ability pressed at the wrong time hampers them completely. And this could absolutely be why engineers are not necessarily played, or played as often as other specializations. While other professions might be a little bit easier, this is a tougher one to jump into and might not be appealing to a lot of newer players. And Guild Wars 2, of course, also being quoted as the casual MMO, it might not be that intriguing to master a whole bunch of buttons and figure out when to throw the bomb. And some players just don't want to get into the nuances of all of the turrets and elixirs and such like that, when I can just be a 10-foot tall Norwegian and whack things with a stick. Engineers do not have any obvious limitations when we talk about specifically their class fantasy, or even in that sense, their role in the meta, because they can earn their spot. That is not the case. I believe that the issue that most people have with engineers is that they have a complicated toolkit and they're outperformed by professions that have a heck of a lot easier time doing their damage or healing without having to worry worry about 30 different buttons. That might also play into the Revenant, which has the 8th least played time. It's a really unique profession, and they have a bunch of really neat elite specializations, but a fairly complicated toolkit, and it might not be appealing. Interestingly enough, Mesmer is the 5th most played profession in Guild Wars 2, which from the outside, because I haven't played Mesmer, I haven't dove into that, we'll say, they seem very complicated. It seems like there's a lot going on. It seems like it would be a tough profession to master. But that also might be large in part that Mesmers were in Guild Wars, the original, and it was arguably one of the most loved professions. And it's also one of the most unique professions across MMORPGs. I mean, an illusionist. I don't believe engineers have anything inherently wrong with them. Let me end by saying that. Their builds, their playstyles, their roles in endgame content, I mean, they're all there. They have earned their spot. I believe the main reason that they are not as popular as other professions is their complex nature. There's a lot going on with this profession, and there's a lot of attention that needs to be played for. And that also might not be appealing for players in Guild Wars 2. Well, let's be serious. It's a casual MMO. It's quoted as the casual MMO. And you have a fairly complicated profession. Now, I'm also going to say that I'm learning engineers, and I'm having a tough time, a rough time, we'll say, figuring out what I should do at the certain times, where I should position myself. I'm going to be trying PvP, so stay tuned for that. But I also believe that it is a profession that is worth playing. I definitely recommend, if you've never played engineer, definitely get in there and play it. It's a blast. Which profession do you believe is the most popular? Tell me in the comment section down below. Or if you have any opinion on the engineer, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Also, if you want to check out my latest goal guide, check this video right here. As always, I am the Caffeinated Dad, and I will see you guys around.